Hello, welcome to an OutSystems webinar on Authentication and Security. For the next 10 minutes, we'll learn how to build secure applications using easy techniques that can be applied on the OutSystems platform. Let's look at our agenda. First, we'll remember some concepts about authentication and authorization mentioned on the first webinars about this theme. Next, we'll talk about permission areas and what we can do with them. Then, we'll talk about the login mechanism and the ways we have to do it. Related to this, we'll talk about single sign-on and we will learn how to use it on OutSystems platform. Finally, we'll talk again about permission areas and how we can share them between e-spaces. As mentioned on the first webinar on Authentication and Security, authentication is a process of attempting to verify the digital identity of the sender of a communication, such as a request to log in. To gain access to an application, we typically ask the user to provide a username and a password. This way, we assure that the person logging in is actually the person that is supposed to have access to our application. Another important concept is authorization, which, by definition, is allowing access to resources only to those permitted to use them. In the OutSystems platform, we use this in the form of permission areas, which are defined in the e-spaces and can be shared between them. Let's take a look on the permission areas properties and see what we can do with them. Here we are in Service Studio. We have just created a very simple e-space with only one web screen and its preparation action. As we can see, on the e-space element tree we have the permission areas. By default, each e-space is created with anonymous and registered permission areas, but we can, of course, create whatever permission areas we want. And how do we do it? It's very simple. We simply click the right button in the permission areas, select Add Permission Area, and then we can change the properties such as name and others. We have just created administrator and user permission areas. Over each permission area, we can perform three different actions. We can perform a grant permission, by which we assign the corresponding permission area to a specific user, and as a result, the user can access all the screens associated with that permission area. We can also use revoke permission, which is the opposite for grant, and so this action will remove the corresponding permission area from the selected user. The other action you can use is check permission, by which we can verify whether user has grants to this corresponding permission or not. The three actions have the same optional parameter, which is user ID. If you don't provide it, the operation will be related to the current session user. On the web screen properties, we can decide which permission areas allow to see this screen. For this example, we will allow administrator and user to see web screen 1. We are now going to talk about the login. As mentioned before, login typically asks for a username and a password, which identifies the user. If we have a unique e-space, let's say a directory e-space, we must have an entity where we store information about the users. Then we can have other e-spaces, such as news or email, and we must keep information about each one of those application users separately. This works fine, but we have a great probability of having repeated data in each of those entities, since the users of directory could be the same of news, and for that same reason the user must have one username and password for directory and another one for news. It works, but it isn't the best solution. So, how can we improve this? We can have a user entity that is shared by all the applications we have, and this way we solve our problem. Now the users have only one username and password for all our applications, and we no longer have repeated data in similar entities. How do we do this in the OutSystems platform? It's pretty easy, actually. In order to share this user entity, we must define one eSpace as the user provider. On our example, we'll choose directory. How do we do this? One of the eSpace properties is user provider. We simply change this property to yes, and this way directory is now a user provider for every application we want, meaning that the user entity in directory eSpace saves all application users' information. This user entity is created by default on each new eSpace. The eSpace must be published to use these properties. And how do we use these in other eSpaces? Let's say we want directory to provide the users for the news eSpace. We simply go to the news eSpace properties and first check if this eSpace is not a user provider. By default, it won't be. Then we choose the user provider property and select the option Select eSpace from Server. That'll open a pop-up with the eSpaces published on the server, which are user providers. There we'll have our directory eSpace. Simply choose it, and it will be the user provider for news application. Permission areas can also be shared by several eSpaces. This can be very useful if you have a user management application such as OutSystems Enterprise Manager. Let's see how you can share permission areas on Service Studio. Let's go back to directory eSpace where we have created the administrator and user permission areas. If we want these areas to be shared with other eSpaces, we simply select Yes on the property Public in the permission area. For this change to be effective, the directory eSpace must be published. To use this permission area on other eSpaces, news for example, we must go to Add Remove References, search Directory, and select the permission areas we want. This way, we can use the selected permission areas as if they were created in the news eSpace. We remembered authentication authorization concepts, and we have applied authorization in the OutSystems platform using permission areas. We saw that we have three actions that can be used in permission areas: grant, revoke, and check permissions. We talked about single sign-on on OutSystems Applications Login, when we shared user information between several eSpaces using the isUserProvider eSpace property. We've also learned how to share permission areas through eSpaces by making them public permission areas on one eSpace and then adding them to another using the Add Remove Reference mechanism. To learn more about the Agile platform, go to our online training, the Agile Network Academy, and take the courses there. To get hands-on, access a number of technical resources, discussion forums, and ready-to-use components and applications on the Agile Network Tech Center. Thank you.